In the span of a single night, a magnificent empire, a mighty maritime power with technologies that surpass their time, vanishes from the face of the earth.
No debris, no witnesses.
Only legend. How is such a thing possible? Atlantis, myth or memory of a real catastrophe. The idea of Atlantis originates from Plato's dialogues, written around 360 BCE. He claimed it was a civilization that existed 9,000 years before his time and perished as a result of one terrible day and night. This story has become one of the most enigmatic topics in human history, influencing culture, archaeology, philosophy, and in recent years, science itself. Today, we attempt to gather all evidence, versions, and testimonies to understand, could Atlantis truly have vanished in a single night? And if so, why? What force could erase an entire civilization so completely that only whispers remain in ancient texts? What catastrophe could be so absolute that it leaves no trace except in the collective memory of humanity? Historical context. The origins of Atlantis trace back to two of Plato's most enduring works, the Timaeus and the Critias. Written in the 4th century BCE, these dialogues present what appears to be a detailed historical account of a lost civilization. According to Plato's narrative, Atlantis was situated beyond the Pillars of Heracles, what we now know as the Strait of Gibraltar. This positioning placed it in the vast Atlantic Ocean, far from the familiar waters of the Mediterranean world. Plato's description of Atlantis paints a picture of unprecedented grandeur and sophistication. The island was said to be larger than Libya and Asia combined, a landmass of extraordinary proportions. Its capital city was described as a marvel of engineering, constructed in concentric circles of alternating water and land. The innermost circle contained a magnificent palace and temple dedicated to Poseidon, the god of the sea who was said to be the divine progenitor of the Atlantean royal line. The Atlanteans, according to Plato, possessed knowledge and technology that far exceeded that of their contemporaries. They had developed advanced metallurgy, working with materials unknown to the rest of the ancient world. Their architecture was grand and sophisticated, incorporating complex water management systems and engineering marvels. The island itself was rich in natural resources, blessed with fertile soil, abundant minerals, and strategic positioning that made it a hub of ancient trade networks. The political structure of Atlantis was described as a confederation of 10 kingdoms, each ruled by a descendant of Poseidon. These rulers met regularly to discuss matters of governance and maintain the laws supposedly given to them by their divine ancestor. The civilization was characterized by its naval power, maintaining fleets that could project force across vast distances and establish trade relationships with distant lands. For generations, the Atlanteans prospered under this divine mandate. Their society was marked by justice, wisdom, and spiritual devotion. They were skilled in the arts of war and peace alike, developing both military technologies and peaceful sciences. Their influence extended far beyond their island home, reaching into Europe and Africa, establishing colonies and trading posts that spread their advanced knowledge and culture. However, according to Plato's account, this golden age was not destined to last. Over time, the divine nature of the Atlantean rulers began to fade, diluted by successive generations of mortal blood. As their divine heritage weakened, so too did their moral character. The noble virtues that had once defined their civilization began to deteriorate, replaced by greed, ambition, and the corruption of absolute power. The Atlanteans grew increasingly aggressive and expansionist. No longer content with their island paradise, they sought to conquer and subjugate other nations. Their naval forces launched campaigns of conquest, attempting to subjugate the peoples of the Mediterranean. It was during one such campaign that they encountered the ancestors of the Athenians, who alone among the threatened peoples mounted successful resistance against the Atlantean invasion. The impact of Plato's Atlantis narrative on subsequent thought cannot be overstated. Medieval scholars and geographers pored over his descriptions, attempting to locate the lost island and understand its significance. The story captured the imagination of explorers during the Age of Discovery, with some believing they might find remnants of Atlantean civilization in the New World. During the Renaissance, the Atlantis myth became intertwined with utopian thinking. Philosophers and political theorists saw in Plato's description a model for ideal society, while others viewed it as a cautionary tale about the dangers of hubris and moral decay. The story provided a framework for discussing questions of governance, justice, and the proper relationship between divine authority and human ambition. The Enlightenment brought new perspectives to the Atlantis question. Scholars began to approach the story with more critical methodology, questioning whether Plato intended his account as literal history or philosophical allegory. Some argued that the detailed nature of his descriptions suggested access to genuine historical sources, while others maintained that the story was entirely fictional, designed to illustrate philosophical principles about ideal societies and their inevitable decline. The 19th century witnessed a surge of interest in Atlantis, coinciding with advances in archaeology and historical methodology. Scholars began to identify potential real-world correlates to Plato's description, pointing to various ancient civilizations that had experienced sudden collapse or decline. The discovery of Troy by Heinrich Schliemann demonstrated that locations long considered purely mythical could indeed have historical basis, lending credibility to the possibility that Atlantis too might have a foundation in reality. In the modern era, the Atlantis narrative has continued to evolve and adapt. Archaeological discoveries have revealed sophisticated ancient civilizations previously unknown to history, suggesting that the ancient world was far more complex and interconnected than previously imagined. The Minoan civilization of Crete, the Indus Valley civilization, and other Bronze Age cultures have all been proposed as potential historical models for Plato's Atlantis. Contemporary scholars have also noted intriguing parallels between Plato's account and other ancient flood myths and stories of lost civilizations. The Epic of Gilgamesh, Hindu texts describing advanced ancient civilizations, and indigenous American traditions of sunken lands all share thematic elements with the Atlantis story. These parallels suggest either common historical origins or universal human concerns about the fragility of civilization and the consequences of moral corruption. The absence of any definitive archaeological evidence for Atlantis has not diminished its cultural impact. The story continues to inspire scientific inquiry, archaeological expeditions, and speculative research. Advanced technologies including satellite imagery, deep-sea exploration, and geological analysis have opened new avenues for investigation, though none have yet provided conclusive evidence for the existence of Plato's lost civilization. What remains clear is that Atlantis, whether historical reality or philosophical construct, represents something profound in human consciousness. It embodies both our highest aspirations for civilization and our deepest fears about its potential destruction. The story forces us to confront questions about the nature of progress, the relationship between technological advancement and moral development, and the ultimate fate of human societies that grow too powerful for their own good. As we delve deeper into the mystery of Atlantis, we must consider not only what Plato wrote, but what he left unsaid. The gaps in his narrative, the questions left unanswered, and the implications of his story for our understanding of the ancient world all contribute to the enduring fascination with this lost civilization. The stage is now set for examining the final act of this ancient drama, the catastrophic events that supposedly erased an entire civilization from the face of the earth in the span of a single day and night. The disappearance. The final chapters of Atlantis, according to Plato's account, unfold with the inexorable logic of tragedy. As the divine blood of the Atlantean rulers grew thin through successive generations, their once noble civilization began to exhibit the fatal flaws that would ultimately lead to its destruction. The transformation was gradual but irreversible, a slow corruption that ate away at the moral foundations of their society like rust-consuming metal. The Atlanteans, once content with their island paradise and just governance, became consumed by an insatiable hunger for power and conquest. Their advanced technology and naval supremacy, gifts that had once been used for trade and peaceful exploration, were now turned toward military domination. The same engineering prowess that had created their magnificent capital city was redirected toward the construction of vast fleets and terrible weapons of war. The first phase of their decline manifested in their treatment of neighboring peoples. Where once they had been generous trading partners and cultural ambassadors, they now demanded tribute and submission. Their colonies, previously established through mutual agreement and beneficial exchange, became outposts of exploitation and control. The Atlantean civilization, which had once been a beacon of enlightenment, cast an increasingly dark shadow across the ancient world. The corruption spread from the ruling class downward through Atlantean society. The pursuit of luxury and pleasure replaced the earlier virtues of wisdom and justice. The great temples, once centers of spiritual devotion and philosophical inquiry, became monuments to material excess. The arts and sciences, previously dedicated to understanding the natural world and improving human condition, were perverted to serve the appetites of a decadent elite. This moral decay manifested most clearly in their military campaigns. The Atlanteans launched a series of aggressive wars, seeking to expand their empire across the Mediterranean and beyond. Their target was nothing less than the complete subjugation of all free peoples, the establishment of a universal empire under Atlantean dominance. The same naval technology that had once facilitated peaceful trade now carried armies of conquest to distant shores. It was during this period of expansion that the Atlanteans encountered the ancestors of the Athenians. According to Plato's account, Athens alone among the threatened peoples possessed the courage and capability to resist the Atlantean invasion. The Athenians, though vastly outnumbered and outgunned, fought with a desperation born of the knowledge that they were humanity's last hope against tyranny. The war between Athens and Atlantis was more than a mere conflict between two powers. It was a clash between two fundamentally different visions of civilization. The Athenians represented the ideals of freedom, democracy, and justice, while the Atlanteans embodied the corruption of power and the dangers of unchecked ambition. The outcome of this struggle would determine not only the fate of the Mediterranean world, but the very future of human civilization. The Athenian resistance proved surprisingly effective. Through superior strategy, fierce determination, and perhaps divine favor, they managed to halt the Atlantean advance. The seemingly invincible naval forces of Atlantis found themselves frustrated by the tactical brilliance and unwavering resolve of their opponents. For the first time in generations, the Atlanteans faced the possibility of defeat. But the gods, it seems, had already passed judgment on the corrupted civilization. Even as the military campaign against Athens reached its climax, divine retribution was gathering like a storm on the horizon. The same powers that had once blessed the Atlanteans with prosperity and knowledge now turned against them with terrible fury. According to Plato's account, the destruction came without warning. In the space of a single day and night, the entire island of Atlantis was consumed by earthquakes and floods of unprecedented violence. The carefully engineered canals and harbors that had made the capital city a marvel of the ancient world became conduits for destruction as the sea rushed in with unstoppable force. The great palaces and temples, built to last for eternity, crumbled like sand castles before the divine wrath. The advanced technology that had made the Atlanteans masters of their world proved useless against the elemental forces now unleashed upon them. The same island that had seemed so secure, protected by its oceanic moats and mighty walls, became a trap from which there was no escape. The speed and completeness of the destruction was absolute. The magnificent capital city, with its concentric circles of land and water, its towering palaces and gleaming temples, its bustling harbors and sophisticated infrastructure, was obliterated so thoroughly that nothing remained above the waves. The population, from the highest nobles to the humblest servants, perished in the catastrophe. The naval forces that had terrorized the Mediterranean were presumably destroyed as well, either caught in the same catastrophe that claimed their homeland or scattered and leaderless after the destruction of their base of power. The vast network of colonies and trading posts established by the Atlanteans either collapsed from lack of support or were absorbed by local populations who had no reason to remember their former masters fondly. The aftermath of the destruction was as significant as the event itself. The location where Atlantis had stood became unnavigable, choked with mud and debris stirred up by the catastrophic earthquakes and floods. Ships attempting to cross the area found their passage blocked by shallow waters and treacherous currents. The Atlantic Ocean, once a highway for Atlantean commerce and military expeditions, became a barrier impassable to the navigation technologies of the ancient world. Most remarkably, the memory of Atlantis seemed to fade from human consciousness with almost supernatural speed. While the Athenians preserved some record of their conflict with the lost civilization, most other peoples forgot entirely about the empire that had once threatened their freedom. The colonies and trading posts established by the Atlanteans lost their connection to their origins, and within a few generations, their inhabitants had no memory of their Atlantean heritage. The silence that followed the destruction was profound and disturbing. No contemporary accounts survive from witnesses to the catastrophe. No refugees appear to have escaped to tell their story. No archaeological evidence has been definitively identified as belonging to the lost civilization. It was as if Atlantis had never existed, save for the story preserved in Plato's dialogues. Even in ancient times, this complete erasure of such a supposedly great civilization struck some observers as suspicious. How could an empire that had once threatened to conquer the known world vanish so completely that only a single source preserved its memory? How could a catastrophe of such magnitude leave no trace in the geological record or the collective memory of other peoples? Some ancient commentators suggested that Plato had invented the entire story as a philosophical allegory, a means of illustrating his ideas about ideal societies and their inevitable corruption. Others argued that while the basic events might be historical, the details had been embellished or distorted through generations of oral transmission before reaching Plato's sources. The mystery deepened when scholars noted that no other ancient source, whether Greek, Egyptian, or from any other civilization, made any reference to Atlantis. This was particularly puzzling given that Plato claimed to have learned the story from Egyptian priests, who supposedly preserved it in their ancient records. Yet Egyptian sources that have survived to the present day make no mention of any such civilization or catastrophe. The absence of corroborating evidence has led some modern scholars to conclude that Atlantis was indeed a fictional creation, a philosophical thought experiment rather than a historical account. Others argue that the lack of evidence might itself be evidence of the thoroughness of the destruction, or that the true location of Atlantis has yet to be discovered. The debate over the historical reality of Atlantis has continued for over 2 millennia without resolution. Each generation of scholars has brought new methodologies and perspectives to the question, yet the fundamental mystery remains unsolved. The story of Atlantis continues to haunt our collective imagination, a reminder of the fragility of even the greatest civilizations and the ultimate consequences of moral corruption. As we stand at the threshold of examining the various theories that have been proposed to explain the disappearance of Atlantis, we must confront the possibility that the truth may be stranger than any fiction. The complete and absolute nature of the destruction, the perfect erasure of all evidence, the profound silence that followed, all suggest forces at work beyond the normal scope of historical causation. Whether these forces were natural, human, or something else entirely remains one of history's most compelling mysteries. Theories and hypotheses. The mystery of Atlantis has spawned countless theories over the centuries, each attempting to explain either the reality behind Plato's account or the reasons for its creation. These theories range from the academically rigorous to the wildly speculative, reflecting humanity's enduring fascination with lost civilizations and catastrophic events. Each hypothesis brings its own evidence and logic, yet none has achieved universal acceptance among scholars. The most conventional academic interpretation suggests that Atlantis was entirely a product of Plato's imagination, a philosophical allegory designed to illustrate his ideas about ideal societies and their inevitable corruption. Proponents of this view argue that the story fits too perfectly into Plato's broader philosophical framework to be coincidental. The rise and fall of Atlantis serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of hubris and moral decay, themes that permeate much of Plato's work. Supporting this interpretation is the fact that Plato was known to use fictional narratives to convey philosophical truths. The allegory of the cave, for instance, uses an imaginary scenario to explore questions about reality and knowledge. Similarly, the Republic presents an idealized state that Plato acknowledges may never have existed in reality. The detailed and coherent nature of the Atlantis story, rather than suggesting historical accuracy, may simply reflect Plato's skill as a storyteller and philosopher. The allegorical interpretation gains further support from the moral structure of the narrative. The Atlanteans begin as an ideal civilization, blessed by divine favor and characterized by justice and wisdom, Their gradual corruption and eventual destruction follow a pattern that perfectly illustrates Plato's theories about the cyclical nature of governments and societies. The story serves as a warning about what happens when leaders abandon virtue in favor of power and material gain. However, the allegorical interpretation faces significant challenges. The level of detail in Plato's account seems excessive for a simple philosophical illustration. The precise geographical descriptions, the complex social and political structures, and the specific military and technological capabilities all suggest either genuine historical knowledge or an extraordinary level of fictional elaboration. Moreover, Plato explicitly claims that the story is true, distinguishing it from his acknowledged allegories. An alternative interpretation suggests that Atlantis was based on real historical events, but was not intended as a literal account. According to this view, Plato may have used the story of Atlantis as a vehicle for commenting on contemporary political events, particularly the rise and fall of Athens itself. The Athenian Empire of the 5th century BCE had exhibited many of the same characteristics attributed to Atlantis: naval supremacy, extensive colonies, cultural sophistication, and eventual moral corruption. This political interpretation is supported by the timing of Plato's writing. The dialogues containing the Atlantis story were written in the aftermath of Athens' devastating defeat in the Peloponnesian War. The description of Atlantis as a great naval power that ultimately destroys itself through hubris and aggression could be seen as a reflection on Athens' own imperial ambitions and their catastrophic consequences. The story would thus serve as both a critique of Athenian imperialism and a warning about the dangers of unchecked power. The political reading gains additional credibility from Plato's known concerns about the moral and political state of Athens. Throughout his works, he criticizes the democracy of his time for its tendency toward demagoguery and its susceptibility to corruption. The Atlantis story, with its emphasis on the importance of virtue in governance and the consequences of moral decay, fits perfectly into this broader critique of contemporary political systems. Yet this interpretation also faces obstacles. While the parallels between Atlantis and Athens are striking, they are not perfect. The geographical and chronological details provided by Plato do not correspond to any known historical events or locations associated with Athens. Moreover, if Plato intended the story as political commentary, why did he not make the connection more explicit, as he did in other works? A third major category of interpretation suggests that Atlantis was based on genuine historical memories of a real civilization, though not necessarily one that matched Plato's description in all details. This view has gained support from archaeological discoveries that have revealed sophisticated ancient civilizations previously unknown to history. The most frequently cited candidate for the historical Atlantis is the Minoan civilization of Crete. The Minoan hypothesis centers on the catastrophic eruption of the volcano Thera, modern Santorini, around 1600 BCE. This eruption was one of the largest in recorded history, sending ash clouds across the Mediterranean and generating massive tsunamis that devastated coastal settlements. The eruption effectively ended the Minoan civilization, which had been the dominant maritime power in the Aegean Sea for centuries. The parallels between the Minoans and Plato's Atlanteans are striking. Both were advanced maritime civilizations with sophisticated art, architecture, and technology. Both had extensive trade networks and cultural influence throughout the Mediterranean. Both met their end through sudden catastrophic destruction involving earthquakes and floods. The Minoan palace complexes, with their intricate layouts and advanced engineering, echo the descriptions of Atlantean architecture. Archaeological evidence from Crete and other Minoan sites reveals a civilization of remarkable sophistication. The Minoans had developed advanced plumbing systems, used sophisticated artistic techniques, and engaged in extensive international trade. Their sudden disappearance from the historical record around 1450 BCE, following the Thera eruption, mirrors the abrupt vanishing of Atlantis described by Plato. However, the Minoan hypothesis faces significant chronological and geographical challenges. The time frame of Minoan civilization does not match Plato's dating of Atlantis to 9,000 years before his time. The location of Crete, while Mediterranean rather than Atlantic, does not correspond to Plato's description of Atlantis as lying beyond the Pillars of Heracles. Most critically, Crete did not disappear beneath the waves but remained inhabited, albeit by different peoples, after the collapse of Minoan civilization. Some scholars have attempted to address these discrepancies by suggesting that Plato or his sources may have distorted the original story through errors in transmission or deliberate embellishment. The passage of time between the actual events and Plato's writing could have led to confusion about dates and locations. Alternatively, Plato may have combined elements from multiple historical sources to create a composite narrative. Another natural disaster theory focuses on the possibility of a massive tsunami or earthquake that could have destroyed an island civilization. Geological evidence shows that the Mediterranean and Atlantic regions have experienced numerous catastrophic events throughout history. A major earthquake or underwater landslide could theoretically have generated waves large enough to devastate an island civilization, while subsequent geological activity might have obscured the evidence. The tsunami hypothesis is supported by growing scientific understanding of megatsunamis and their potential for destruction. Modern research has documented historical tsunamis that traveled thousands of miles and caused devastation far from their point of origin. A sufficiently large underwater earthquake or volcanic eruption could theoretically have generated waves capable of destroying an island civilization and leaving little trace behind. Some researchers have proposed that the destruction of Atlantis might have been caused by an asteroid or comet impact. Such an event could have generated massive tsunamis, triggered widespread geological activity, and caused rapid climate change. The impact hypothesis would explain both the sudden nature of the destruction and the absence of archaeological evidence, as the impact site might now lie beneath the ocean or have been obscured by subsequent geological activity. The asteroid theory gains some support from evidence of past cosmic impacts and their effects on Earth's climate and geology. The Younger Dryas period, around 12,900 years ago, saw rapid climate change that some researchers attribute to a cosmic impact. If such an event occurred in the Atlantic Ocean, it might have destroyed any island civilizations in the region while leaving little direct evidence behind. However, the impact hypothesis faces the same problem as other natural disaster theories: the lack of definitive geological evidence. No confirmed impact crater has been identified that corresponds to the timeframe suggested by Plato. The absence of the distinctive geological markers typically associated with major impacts makes this theory difficult to verify. A more speculative category of theories suggests that Atlantis may have been connected to unknown or forgotten technologies. Some researchers propose that advanced ancient civilizations might have possessed knowledge or capabilities that have been lost to history. This could explain the seemingly impossible engineering feats attributed to the Atlanteans and the complete absence of archaeological evidence. The lost technology hypothesis encompasses a wide range of possibilities, from advanced metallurgy and engineering techniques to more exotic possibilities like anti-gravity or energy manipulation. Proponents point to various ancient structures and artifacts that seem to demonstrate capabilities beyond what conventional archaeology attributes to their creators. The precision of ancient stone cutting, the logistics of moving massive blocks, and the sophistication of certain ancient technologies all suggest that our ancestors may have possessed knowledge that has been lost. However, the lost technology theory faces significant skepticism from mainstream archaeology and science. The absence of any definitive evidence for advanced ancient technologies, combined with the lack of a plausible mechanism for how such knowledge could have been completely lost, makes this hypothesis difficult to accept. Moreover, many supposed examples of impossible ancient technology have been explained through conventional means as archaeological techniques have improved. A related set of theories suggests that Atlantis may have been part of a global civilization that existed before recorded history. This prehistoric civilization might have possessed advanced knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, and engineering that was passed down through various cultures around the world. The similarities between ancient myths and legends from different cultures are cited as evidence for this shared heritage. The global civilization theory attempts to explain the widespread distribution of similar architectural techniques, astronomical knowledge, and flood myths across different cultures. Proponents argue that these similarities are too numerous and specific to be coincidental, suggesting a common origin in a lost civilization. The sudden appearance of advanced civilization in various parts of the world around the same time period is also cited as evidence for this theory. Yet this hypothesis faces the same evidentiary challenges as other speculative theories. The lack of definitive archaeological evidence for a global prehistoric civilization combined with the alternative explanation that cultural similarities arose through independent development or limited contact, makes the theory difficult to prove. Modern archaeology has shown that ancient peoples were more capable of independent innovation and long-distance contact than previously believed. The mythological interpretation of Atlantis suggests that the story may represent a collective cultural memory of actual catastrophic events, preserved in various forms across different cultures. According to this view, the specific details of Plato's account may be fictional, but the underlying memory of a great flood or disaster that destroyed advanced civilizations may be based on real events. This interpretation is supported by the prevalence of flood myths in cultures around the world. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the biblical account of Noah's flood, Hindu stories of great deluges, and indigenous American tales of world-destroying floods all share common elements that suggest possible historical origins. The end of the last ice age, around 12,000 years ago, involved massive changes in sea level and climate that could have destroyed coastal civilizations and left lasting memories in human culture. The mythological approach offers a middle ground between complete skepticism and literal belief in Plato's account. It acknowledges that while the specific story of Atlantis may be fictional, it could be based on real historical events that were preserved in cultural memory and eventually incorporated into Plato's philosophical narrative. This interpretation allows for the possibility that some form of advanced ancient civilization existed and was destroyed by natural catastrophe, while recognizing that the details of the story may have been embellished or distorted over time. As we examine these various theories, we must confront the fundamental challenge that has plagued Atlantis research for millennia: the absence of definitive evidence. Each hypothesis offers compelling arguments and suggestive evidence, yet none provides the conclusive proof that would settle the question once and for all. The mystery of Atlantis remains as enigmatic today as it was when Plato first recorded the story over 2,000 years ago. The diversity of theories reflects not only the complexity of the Atlantis question, but also the deep human need to understand our past and our place in the cosmos. Whether Atlantis was real or fictional, historical or allegorical, the story continues to captivate our imagination and challenge our understanding of ancient history. As we turn to examine the archaeological evidence, we must remember that the absence of proof is not necessarily proof of absence, and that the greatest mysteries often lie hidden in plain sight. Archaeological evidence and traces. The search for physical evidence of Atlantis has driven archaeological exploration for over a century, yielding tantalizing clues but no definitive answers. Unlike other lost civilizations that have been rediscovered through systematic excavation, Atlantis remains stubbornly elusive, its very existence dependent on interpretation of ambiguous evidence and disputed artifacts. The archaeological record presents a frustrating paradox. Numerous sophisticated ancient civilizations have been discovered, yet none matches the specific description provided by Plato. The most extensively studied candidate for Atlantis remains the Minoan civilization of Crete. Excavations at Knossos, Phaistos, and other Minoan sites have revealed a sophisticated Bronze Age culture that flourished from approximately 2700 to 1100 BCE. The Minoan palaces, with their complex layouts, advanced plumbing systems, and sophisticated art, demonstrate a level of civilization that rivals any contemporary culture. The famous frescoes depicting bull leaping, marine life, and elegant court scenes suggest a peaceful, prosperous society with extensive maritime connections. The archaeological evidence from Crete is particularly compelling when considered alongside the geological record of the Thera eruption. Core samples from the Mediterranean seabed show layers of volcanic ash that can be precisely dated to around 1600 BCE, confirming the timing and magnitude of this catastrophic event. The ash layers extend across a vast area, demonstrating that the eruption would have had devastating effects on any civilization in the region. Excavations on Santorini itself have revealed a sophisticated Bronze Age settlement at Akrotiri, preserved beneath the volcanic ash like a Mediterranean Pompeii. The Akrotiri excavations have provided remarkable insights into pre-eruption life on Santorini. The site reveals a prosperous town with multi-story buildings, sophisticated drainage systems, and elaborate frescoes depicting naval scenes and exotic animals. The absence of human remains suggests that the inhabitants had warning of the impending eruption and evacuated before the final catastrophe. The preservation of organic materials, including wooden furniture and food stores, provides unprecedented detail about daily life in the Bronze Age Aegean. However, the Minoan connection to Atlantis faces significant chronological challenges. Radiocarbon dating of organic materials from Minoan sites consistently places the civilization's peak centuries after the date given by Plato for Atlantis. Even allowing for errors in ancient chronology, the discrepancy is too large to be easily explained away. Moreover, while the Minoan civilization did decline after the Thera eruption, it did not disappear entirely. Minoan culture continued for several centuries, eventually being absorbed into the Mycenaean Greek world. The geographical problems with the Minoan hypothesis are equally significant. Crete lies firmly within the Mediterranean, not beyond the Pillars of Heracles as Plato specified. While some scholars have argued that ancient geographical knowledge was limited and that Plato might have been confused about locations, this explanation requires us to assume significant errors in what purports to be a carefully preserved historical account. Archaeological investigations have also focused on other potential locations for Atlantis. The Dinana National Park in southwestern Spain has been proposed as a candidate site based on satellite imagery that reveals geometric patterns beneath the marshland. Ground-penetrating radar and core sampling have identified what appear to be artificial structures buried beneath layers of sediment. The location fits Plato's description of Atlantis as lying beyond the Pillars of Heracles, and the geological evidence suggests that the area was once above sea level. The Spanish hypothesis gained attention through the work of archaeologist Richard Freund, who used advanced imaging techniques to map the subsurface structures. The images reveal what appear to be concentric circles and rectangular formations that match some elements of Plato's description. However, ground truth excavations have failed to confirm the artificial nature of these formations, and many archaeologists remain skeptical of the interpretation. More controversial are the underwater structures discovered in various locations around the world. The Bimini Road in the Bahamas, first discovered in 1968, consists of large rectangular limestone blocks arranged in what appears to be a deliberate pattern. The structure extends for several hundred meters along the ocean floor, and its geometric regularity has led some researchers to claim it as evidence of ancient construction. However, geological analysis has shown that the blocks are natural limestone formations created by known geological processes rather than human engineering. Similar underwater formations have been reported off the coasts of Cuba, Japan, and India. In each case, initial discovery has generated excitement about possible ancient ruins, only to be followed by more careful analysis that reveals natural explanations for the structures. The Yonaguni Monument off the coast of Japan, for instance, displays remarkable geometric regularity that initially suggested artificial construction. However, detailed geological study has shown that the formations are consistent with natural weathering patterns of the local sandstone. The search for Atlantis has also been aided by advances in underwater archaeology and remote sensing technology. Side-scan sonar, magnetometry, and submersible exploration have opened vast areas of the ocean floor to archaeological investigation. These technologies have revealed numerous shipwrecks and underwater sites, demonstrating that the sea does preserve archaeological remains under the right conditions. However, none of these discoveries has provided evidence for the large-scale civilization described by Plato. Satellite archaeology has emerged as another powerful tool in the search for lost civilizations. High-resolution imagery and various spectral analysis techniques can reveal archaeological sites that are invisible from ground level. The technique has been successfully used to locate numerous ancient sites, from Roman fortifications to Maya cities hidden beneath jungle canopies. Despite extensive satellite surveys of potential Atlantis locations, no definitive evidence has been identified. The absence of clear archaeological evidence for Atlantis is particularly striking when compared to other ancient civilizations. The discovery of Troy, once considered purely mythical, demonstrated that careful archaeological investigation could confirm the existence of legendary cities. The excavation of Pompeii and Herculaneum showed how volcanic disasters could preserve detailed evidence of ancient life. The discovery of the Indus Valley civilization revealed a sophisticated Bronze Age culture that had been entirely forgotten by history. In each of these cases, archaeological evidence was abundant once the correct location was identified. pottery sherds, building foundations, artifacts, and organic remains all provided confirmation of the civilization's existence. The absence of similar evidence for Atlantis is therefore particularly significant. Either the civilization never existed, or its remains lie in a location that has not yet been discovered, or the destruction was so complete that all evidence has been obliterated. The completeness of the alleged destruction poses particular challenges for archaeological investigation. If Atlantis was indeed swallowed by the sea, any evidence would now lie beneath potentially thousands of meters of water. The deep ocean floor is largely unexplored, and the cost of systematic underwater excavation is prohibitive. Moreover, geological processes over millennia could have buried or destroyed any remains beyond recognition. Recent discoveries have demonstrated that the ancient world was far more interconnected than previously believed. The Bronze Age collapse around 1200 BCE affected civilizations across the Mediterranean and beyond, suggesting complex networks of trade and cultural exchange. The discovery of the Niebuhr sky disk in Germany, with its sophisticated astronomical knowledge, shows that Bronze Age peoples possessed advanced understanding of celestial phenomena. These discoveries suggest that sophisticated civilizations did exist in the ancient world, making the existence of something like Atlantis more plausible. However, the same discoveries also highlight the robust nature of archaeological evidence. Even civilizations that experienced catastrophic collapse left extensive remains. The Indus Valley Civilization, despite its mysterious disappearance, left behind numerous cities, artifacts, and evidence of its sophisticated urban planning. The Maya, despite the collapse of their classic period civilization, left monumental architecture and extensive written records. The complete absence of any definitive evidence for Atlantis remains problematic. The debate over archaeological evidence for Atlantis is further complicated by the phenomenon of pseudoarchaeology. Numerous claims of Atlantis discoveries have been made over the years, often based on misinterpretation of natural formations or wishful thinking. The desire to find evidence for Atlantis has led to the promotion of dubious claims and the dismissal of legitimate archaeological criticism. This has created a climate of skepticism that makes it difficult for any potential evidence to receive fair consideration. Modern archaeology has developed sophisticated techniques for distinguishing between natural and artificial formations. Stone tool analysis, residue studies, and microscopic examination can reveal human modification of natural materials. Dating techniques including radiocarbon dating, thermoluminescence, and potassium-argon dating can provide precise chronological frameworks. DNA analysis of organic remains can reveal population movements and cultural connections. These techniques have revolutionized our understanding of the ancient world, yet they have not provided evidence for Atlantis. The application of these techniques to potential Atlantis sites has consistently failed to confirm artificial construction or human habitation. The geometric patterns that initially suggest human design are revealed to be natural formations created by geological processes. The absence of associated artifacts, human remains, or clear evidence of habitation undermines claims of ancient construction. The dating of supposedly ancient structures often reveals them to be much younger than claimed, sometimes dating to historical periods when their construction is well documented. Despite these challenges, the search for archaeological evidence of Atlantis continues. New technologies and methodologies constantly expand the possibilities for discovery. Climate change and coastal erosion sometimes reveal previously hidden archaeological sites. The deep ocean remains largely unexplored, and advances in underwater technology may eventually make systematic exploration feasible. The possibility remains that future discoveries could shed new light on the Atlantis question. The archaeological evidence, or lack thereof, ultimately leaves the question of Atlantis unresolved. The absence of definitive proof does not conclusively disprove the existence of the civilization, but it does raise serious questions about the literal accuracy of Plato's account. The sophisticated nature of known ancient civilizations demonstrates that something like Atlantis could have existed, yet the complete absence of evidence suggests that if it did exist, it was either very different from Plato's description or has been obliterated beyond archaeological recognition. As we move from the realm of archaeological evidence to consider the mythological and legendary aspects of the Atlantis story, We must remember that the absence of physical remains does not necessarily negate the possibility of historical truth. Sometimes the most important truths are preserved not in stone and metal, but in the stories and memories passed down through generations. The legends and folklore surrounding lost civilizations may preserve kernels of historical reality that have been obscured by time and embellishment. Mystical explanations and legends. Beyond the realm of conventional archaeology and historical analysis lies a shadowy domain of mystical explanations and ancient legends that attempt to account for the disappearance of Atlantis. These narratives, passed down through oral traditions, esoteric teachings, and folklore from cultures across the globe, paint a picture of cosmic forces and supernatural events that transcend the boundaries of normal historical causation. While mainstream scholarship typically dismisses such accounts as fantasy or metaphor, the persistence and global distribution of these stories suggests they may preserve fragments of truth wrapped in layers of myth and symbol. The most widespread of these mystical explanations centers on the concept of divine retribution. According to numerous ancient traditions, the destruction of Atlantis was not merely a natural catastrophe, but a deliberate act of cosmic justice. The gods, angered by the hubris and corruption of the Atlanteans, unleashed forces of destruction that obliterated the civilization so completely that only legend remains. This interpretation transforms the Atlantis story from a historical account into a morality tale with supernatural dimensions. The theme of divine punishment for technological hubris appears in mythologies worldwide. The Tower of Babel narrative from Judeo-Christian tradition tells of humanity's attempt to build a structure reaching the heavens, only to be confounded by divine intervention. Hindu texts describe advanced civilizations that possessed flying machines and devastating weapons, ultimately destroyed by cosmic forces when they overstepped divine boundaries. The Greek myth of Icarus warns of the dangers of flying too close to the sun, while Prometheus suffers eternal punishment for stealing fire from the gods. These parallel narratives suggest a common human understanding that technological advancement without spiritual wisdom leads to destruction. The Atlantis story, viewed through this lens, becomes a cautionary tale about the consequences of divorcing material progress from moral development. The advanced technology attributed to the Atlanteans, rather than being a sign of their superiority, becomes the very cause of their downfall. Some esoteric traditions expand this interpretation to suggest that the Atlanteans possessed knowledge and capabilities that were inherently dangerous. According to these accounts, the civilization had mastered forms of energy manipulation that could literally reshape reality. This power, initially used for beneficial purposes, was gradually corrupted as the Atlanteans became increasingly materialistic and power-hungry. The ultimate catastrophe was not imposed from without but was the inevitable result of their misuse of cosmic forces. The concept of lost spiritual wisdom plays a central role in many mystical interpretations of Atlantis. Theosophical teachings, developed in the late 19th century, describe Atlantis as one of several root races that have inhabited Earth throughout its history. According to this worldview, each root race develops certain spiritual and mental capabilities before eventually declining and being replaced by the next evolutionary stage. The Atlanteans, in this framework, possessed psychic abilities and spiritual knowledge that far exceeded modern humanity, but their material focus led to their destruction. This spiritual interpretation suggests that the knowledge possessed by the Atlanteans was not primarily technological in the modern sense, but involved direct manipulation of natural forces through consciousness and will. The construction of their great monuments and the operation of their society depended on psychic abilities that modern humanity has largely lost. The destruction of Atlantis thus represents not only the end of a civilization but the loss of an entire mode of human consciousness. Indigenous traditions from around the world preserve stories that bear remarkable similarities to the Atlantis narrative. North American tribal legends speak of advanced civilizations that existed before the Great Flood, possessed by peoples who had grown proud and forgotten their connection to the natural world. Polynesian myths describe sunken islands and lost continents that were home to wise peoples who could communicate with the spirits of land and sea. African traditions tell of great kingdoms that vanished beneath the waters when their rulers became corrupt and turned away from the ancestors. The consistency of these flood traditions across cultures separated by vast distances and time periods suggests either a common historical origin or a universal human archetype. The flood myth appears in virtually every culture on Earth, often involving the destruction of a previous world order due to moral corruption. The survivors of these catastrophes are typically portrayed as righteous individuals who preserve essential knowledge and wisdom for future generations. These global flood narratives often include details that parallel the Atlantis story. The civilizations destroyed by the flood are frequently described as technologically advanced but morally corrupt. They are said to have possessed knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, and engineering that was lost in the catastrophe. The survivors, forced to start over with primitive tools and techniques, preserve only fragments of the earlier wisdom in the form of myths, symbols, and sacred practices. The Celtic tradition of the otherworld provides another mystical framework for understanding Atlantis. Celtic mythology describes numerous islands and underwater realms that exist parallel to the physical world. These otherworldly locations are inhabited by beings of great wisdom and power, who occasionally interact with humans but remain largely separate from ordinary reality. The Atlantis story, viewed through this lens, describes not a physical civilization but a spiritual realm that became cut off from human consciousness. This interpretation suggests that Atlantis exists in a dimension adjacent to our own, accessible through altered states of consciousness or spiritual practices, but invisible to normal perception. The disappearance of Atlantis thus represents not a physical destruction but a severing of the connection between the material and spiritual worlds. The knowledge and wisdom of the Atlanteans remains available to those who can access it through mystical means, but it is lost to ordinary human consciousness. The Hermetic tradition, with its emphasis on the correspondence between macrocosm and microcosm, interprets the Atlantis story as an allegory for the fall of human consciousness from a state of unity with the divine to the fragmented awareness of material existence. According to this view, Atlantis represents the golden age of human spiritual development, when individuals possessed direct knowledge of cosmic laws and could manifest their will in the physical world. The destruction of Atlantis symbolizes the fall from this elevated state into the current condition of spiritual ignorance and material bondage. This Hermetic interpretation suggests that the search for Atlantis is ultimately a search for humanity's lost spiritual heritage. The civilization will not be found through archaeological excavation or historical research, but through the development of consciousness and the recovery of ancient wisdom traditions. The technology and knowledge attributed to the Atlanteans become metaphors for spiritual capabilities that remain latent within human consciousness, waiting to be awakened through appropriate practices and disciplines. Certain mystery schools and esoteric orders claim to preserve authentic teachings from Atlantis, passed down through secret initiatory lineages. These traditions assert that the destruction of Atlantis was not complete, that a small group of enlightened individuals escaped the catastrophe and established hidden schools to preserve the essential knowledge. According to these accounts, the wisdom of Atlantis continues to influence human development through the work of these hidden masters, who guide the evolution of consciousness from behind the scenes. The claims of these esoteric traditions are difficult to verify through conventional means, as they typically involve oral teachings, symbolic initiations, and experiential practices rather than written records or physical evidence. However, the persistence of these lineages and the sophistication of their teachings suggests that they may indeed preserve fragments of ancient wisdom, whether or not it actually originates from Atlantis. The astrological tradition provides another mystical framework for understanding the Atlantis story. According to this interpretation, the rise and fall of civilizations corresponds to vast cosmic cycles governed by the precession of the equinoxes and other astronomical phenomena. The destruction of Atlantis marks the end of one great age and the beginning of another, part of a pattern that repeats throughout history as the Earth moves through different phases of cosmic influence. This astrological interpretation suggests that the return of Atlantis is not a historical event, but a cyclical process that occurs when planetary alignments and cosmic conditions are favorable. The knowledge and wisdom of Atlantis becomes available to humanity during certain astrological periods, only to be lost again when the cosmic cycle moves to a different phase. The current age, according to some interpretations, is approaching another period of Atlantean influence, which may explain the renewed interest in the lost civilization. The psychological dimension of the Atlantis story has been explored by various mystical traditions that view the narrative as a map of human consciousness rather than a historical account. According to this interpretation, Atlantis represents an integrated state of awareness that encompasses both rational and intuitive faculties. The destruction of Atlantis symbolizes the split between these modes of consciousness that characterizes modern human psychology. This psychological interpretation suggests that the recovery of Atlantis involves the integration of rational and intuitive consciousness, the healing of the split between mind and heart that has created the current crisis of human civilization. The technology and wisdom attributed to the Atlanteans become metaphors for the capabilities that emerge when human consciousness operates from a state of integration rather than fragmentation. The prophetic traditions of various cultures include predictions about the return of Atlantis or similar lost civilizations. These prophecies typically describe a time when the wisdom of the ancients will be restored, when advanced technology will be guided by spiritual understanding, and when humanity will once again live in harmony with natural forces. The return of Atlantis becomes a symbol of humanity's spiritual destiny, a promise that the current age of materialism and conflict will eventually give way to a new golden age. These prophetic interpretations transform the Atlantis story from a tale of past glory and destruction into a vision of future possibility. The lost civilization becomes a template for human potential, a reminder of what we might achieve when consciousness and technology are properly aligned. The search for Atlantis thus becomes a search for humanity's highest destiny, a quest that involves not only historical research but spiritual development and transformation. The shamanic traditions of indigenous cultures offer another mystical perspective on the Atlantis story. According to these traditions, the destruction of Atlantis was part of a larger pattern of cosmic cycles that periodically transform the Earth and its inhabitants. The shamans who preserve these traditions claim the ability to access memories of previous world ages through altered states of consciousness, journeying to other dimensions where the knowledge of lost civilizations remains accessible. These shamanic interpretations suggest that the wisdom of Atlantis is not lost, but has been transferred to other planes of existence, where it continues to influence human development through dreams, visions, and spiritual practices. The destruction of the physical civilization was necessary to preserve the essential spiritual knowledge, which would have been corrupted if it had remained in material form. As we consider these mystical explanations and legends, we must remember that they represent genuine attempts to understand and preserve important truths about human nature and cosmic order. While these narratives may not conform to the standards of empirical evidence demanded by modern science, they offer insights into the psychological and spiritual dimensions of human experience that are often overlooked by purely rational approaches. The persistence of these mystical traditions across cultures and centuries suggests that they address fundamental questions about human existence that cannot be answered through material investigation alone. Whether or not Atlantis existed as a physical civilization, the story continues to serve as a powerful symbol of human potential and the consequences of spiritual neglect. The mystical interpretations of Atlantis invite us to consider the possibility that the most important truths about human nature and destiny may be preserved not in archaeological remains but in the depths of consciousness itself, waiting to be rediscovered by those who are willing to look beyond the surface of material existence. Conclusion and reflection. As we reach the end of our investigation into the mystery of Atlantis, we find ourselves standing at the intersection of history and myth, science and speculation, evidence and imagination. The question that began our journey, why did Atlantis disappear in a single day, has led us through a labyrinth of theories, interpretations, and possibilities, each offering fragments of insight while the complete truth remains tantalizingly out of reach. The evidence we have examined presents a complex and contradictory picture. Plato's account, detailed and specific, stands alone in the historical record without corroboration from any other ancient source. The allegorical interpretation suggests a masterful philosophical construction designed to illustrate timeless truths about power, corruption, and the fate of civilizations. The historical theories point to real catastrophes and lost civilizations that may have inspired the story. The archaeological evidence, while revealing numerous sophisticated ancient cultures, has failed to provide definitive proof of Plato's Atlantis. The mystical explanations offer profound insights into human consciousness and spiritual development, regardless of their literal historical accuracy. Each approach to the Atlantis mystery reveals different aspects of a deeper truth about human nature and our relationship with the past. The story functions simultaneously as history, philosophy, psychology, and mythology, operating on multiple levels of meaning that resist simple categorization. This multiplicity of interpretation may be the key to understanding why the Atlantis narrative has remained so compelling across more than 2 millennia. The question of whether Atlantis was real or fictional ultimately may be less important than what the story reveals about human aspirations and fears. The vision of a Golden Age civilization, possessed of advanced knowledge and living in harmony with natural forces, represents a persistent human dream of perfection and fulfillment. The catastrophic destruction of this paradise serves as a warning about the consequences of hubris, moral corruption, and the misuse of power. These themes resonate as strongly today as they did in Plato's time, perhaps more so given our current technological capabilities and global challenges. The scientific investigation of the Atlantis question has contributed to our understanding of ancient history, archaeology, and natural catastrophes, even if it has not solved the central mystery. The search for Atlantis has driven advances in underwater archaeology, geological research, and remote sensing technology. It has led to the discovery of numerous ancient sites and civilizations, expanding our knowledge of the sophistication and interconnectedness of the ancient world. These discoveries have shown that the ancient world was far more complex and advanced than previously believed, making the existence of something like Atlantis more plausible, while simultaneously raising the bar for what would constitute definitive evidence. The technological capabilities attributed to the Atlanteans by various theories reflect our own contemporary concerns about the relationship between technological advancement and wisdom. The story serves as a mirror for our own civilization, forcing us to confront questions about the direction of human development and the potential consequences of our actions. The fear that advanced technology might lead to destruction unless guided by wisdom and moral development speaks directly to contemporary concerns about nuclear weapons, climate change, artificial intelligence, and other potentially catastrophic technologies. The global distribution of flood myths and legends of lost civilizations suggests that the Atlantis story may preserve collective memories of real historical events. The end of the last ice age, approximately 12,000 years ago, involved massive changes in sea level and climate that would have had devastating effects on coastal civilizations. The possibility that sophisticated cultures existed during this period and were destroyed by rising seas and climate change remains an open question in archaeology and anthropology. Recent discoveries of underwater sites and evidence of earlier human civilization continue to push back the boundaries of known history. The mystical and spiritual interpretations of Atlantis offer valuable insights into the non-material dimensions of human existence. Whether or not Atlantis existed as a physical civilization, the story continues to serve as a powerful symbol of human potential and the consequences of spiritual neglect. The persistent belief in lost wisdom and golden ages reflects deep psychological needs for meaning, purpose, and connection to something greater than material existence. These needs are as valid today as they were in ancient times, perhaps more so given the atomization and materialism of modern life. The democratization of information through the internet has both aided and complicated the search for Atlantis. On one hand, it has made vast amounts of historical, archaeological, and scientific information accessible to anyone with an internet connection. On the other hand, it has also facilitated the spread of misinformation, pseudoscience, and conspiracy theories. The challenge for contemporary researchers is to maintain scientific rigor while remaining open to new possibilities and interpretations. The commercial and cultural impact of the Atlantis story demonstrates its enduring power to capture human imagination. Books, movies, television shows, and video games continue to explore various interpretations of the lost civilization, each adding new layers to the mythology. This popular culture engagement, while often departing from scholarly interpretations, serves to keep the story alive in collective consciousness and may inspire new generations of researchers and thinkers. The environmental implications of the Atlantis story have gained new relevance in the age of climate change and environmental degradation. The vision of a civilization destroyed by natural catastrophe serves as a warning about the fragility of human societies and the importance of living in harmony with natural forces. The current global environmental crisis lends urgency to these ancient warnings, suggesting that the wisdom preserved in the Atlantis story may be more relevant than ever. The interdisciplinary nature of Atlantis research has brought together scholars from diverse fields including archaeology, geology, oceanography, mythology, psychology, and comparative religion. This cross-pollination of ideas and methodologies has enriched our understanding of ancient history and human culture, even if it has not solved the central mystery. The collaborative approach required for such complex investigations provides a model for addressing other multifaceted questions about human origins and development. The persistence of the Atlantis mystery despite centuries of investigation suggests that some questions may be more valuable for the search they inspire than for any definitive answers they might yield. The quest for Atlantis has driven exploration, discovery, and intellectual development in ways that might not have occurred if the mystery had been easily solved. The journey of investigation, with its false starts, promising leads, and ultimate uncertainties, mirrors the broader human quest for understanding and meaning. As we contemplate the future of Atlantis research, we must acknowledge both the possibilities and limitations of our current approaches. Advances in technology continue to open new avenues for investigation, from deep-sea exploration to genetic analysis of ancient populations. Climate change and coastal erosion may reveal previously hidden archaeological sites. The development of new analytical techniques may provide fresh insights into existing evidence. However, we must also recognize that some questions may remain forever beyond definitive resolution, preserved in the realm of mystery and speculation. The Atlantis story ultimately confronts us with fundamental questions about the nature of knowledge, evidence, and truth. How do we distinguish between fact and fiction, history and myth, possibility and fantasy? What standards of evidence are appropriate for investigating claims about the distant past? How do we balance healthy skepticism with openness to new possibilities? These epistemological questions extend far beyond the specific case of Atlantis to encompass our broader understanding of reality and our place within it. The moral dimension of the Atlantis story remains as relevant today as it was in Plato's time. The warning about the consequences of moral corruption, the importance of wisdom in governance, and the dangers of unchecked power speak directly to contemporary political and social challenges. The story serves as a reminder that technological advancement without corresponding moral development may lead to catastrophic consequences, a lesson that resonates strongly in our current historical moment. In the end, the question of whether Atlantis disappeared in a single day may be less important than what the story teaches us about ourselves and our world. The narrative forces us to confront the fragility of civilization, the importance of wisdom and virtue, and the ultimate consequences of our choices. Whether historical fact or philosophical allegory, the Atlantis story continues to offer valuable insights into the human condition and our eternal quest for understanding, meaning, and transcendence. The mystery of Atlantis reminds us that the past is not simply a collection of facts to be discovered, but a living dialogue between then and now, between what was and what might have been, between the known and the unknowable. In this dialogue, we find not only the possibility of ancient wisdom, but the opportunity to examine our own assumptions, values, and aspirations. The search for Atlantis thus becomes a search for ourselves, a quest that may never end but which enriches us through the very act of searching. As we close this investigation, we are left not with answers but with deeper questions, not with certainty but with wonder. The mystery of Atlantis endures, as it has for over 2 millennia, challenging each generation to grapple with the deepest questions of human existence. Whether the lost civilization will ever be found, whether the truth will ever be known, remains an open question. But perhaps that is exactly as it should be, for in the mystery itself lies the greatest treasure of all: the endless human capacity for hope, wonder, and the search for meaning in an uncertain world. What do you believe? Did Atlantis truly exist? Or is it simply an ancient lesson we have yet to fully learn? The answer, like the lost civilization itself, may be waiting somewhere just beyond our current understanding, in the depths of the ocean, in the pages of an undiscovered text, or in the depths of human consciousness itself. The mystery continues, and with it, the eternal human quest for truth, wisdom, and understanding.